She sold my beach house, my car, my memories, and she thought she took everything from me. But what my daughter didn't know is that I'm not the weak old woman she imagined. I'm Antonia Brooks, and this is how I took my life back. I was staring at a watercolor print of lilies curling above a pond, cheap art chosen to soothe anxious patience, when my phone rang. "Mom, we're going on a trip to Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye." My only daughter, Angela, didn't wait for breath or protest. The call ended with a soft click that felt like a door locking from the other side. 45 years of raising her, nursing fevers, hemming prom dresses, paying late fees, holding my tongue when I should have held the line, and in 2 sentences she reduced me to an obstacle to be moved, a check to be cashed. A younger version of me might have wept there under the fluorescent hum, one more wilted figure in a row of green plastic chairs. But at 71, you learn that tears fix nothing, and clarity fixes everything. So I did the only sensible thing. I closed my eyes, drew in a measured breath, and smiled. My name is Antonia Brooks. 6 months ago, my husband Robert died mid-breakfast, the way angels might quietly, with coffee steaming and toast cooling. He kissed my forehead and said, "Good morning, my love," the way he had for decades. Those were his last words. Since then, our daughter had filled my calendar like a dutiful metronome. 3 visits a week, gentle reminders to eat better, offers to drive me to appointments. I mistook choreography for care. It is astonishing how love can wear the costume of convenience, and how a mother's longing will applaud the performance. The beach house, Angela, sold our small, cream-painted refuge with the porch that smelled of salt and old books, wasn't just a structure. It was where we celebrated Christmas with paper crowns from cheap crackers, where Robert taught her to float face up and trust the ocean to hold her. The old Ford pickup was no less sacred. He polished that truck every Sunday as if gratitude required a rag and wax. Angela knew all this. She sold them anyway. The sting wasn't the money. It was the arithmetic of it, the way she recalculated the sum of our life as if memories depreciate once the owner grows old. But as the nurse called my name and I followed her down the corridor, another memory rose like a lifeline through fog. 3 days before he died, Robert had pressed a manila envelope into my hands. "If something happens to me," he said, eyes steady, "open this when you feel ready." I'd tucked it into the dresser, then into forgetfulness. The way grief blurs edges until nothing is sharp enough to cut through. Angela's call sharpened everything. The doctor peered at charts, listened to my lungs, and declared me in good shape for your age, that strangely qualified compliment elders collect like loyalty points. I nodded, thanked him, and rode the bus home, watching the city stream by couples arguing at crosswalks, a boy kicking a can like it owed him money, a woman considering tomatoes as if destiny hid among them. Everyone has a private storm. Mine was about to change barometric pressure. At home, dusk crept across the hallway photographs, softening the faces of people who either grew up or grew away. I opened the dresser drawer, touched the envelope, and felt the fine grit of manila under my fingertips the way some women feel the grit of sand and remember summers. "Ready," I told Robert's absence, and slid a butter knife under the flap. The contents spilled quietly onto the quilt. Property deeds, clean, assertive corporate paperwork, bank certificates that replaced assumptions with numbers, and a letter in Robert's plain, stubborn handwriting, the kind of hand that balanced budgets and fixed leaky faucets because someone had to. "My dear Antonia," it began, "if you're reading this, I couldn't say these things with my arms around you. Forgive me." He wrote of investments, of a company he formed years ago to shelter our future from both storms and opportunists. We did not only have the beach house. There were 6 other properties, one of them the very apartment building where Angela and her husband, Edward, lived, plus shares in 3 companies whose valuations dwarfed anything I'd imagined. I traced the signatures, his name, my name, and felt something unfamiliar surge through my tired bones. Stability with a spine. I turned pages, not as a widow grasping at artifacts, but as a steward taking inventory. The structure of it all revealed a mind that had played the long game while I kept our short days running. He had placed the assets inside a holding company I'd never heard of and named me sole heir. He had protected me from my own decency, the impulse to tell a daughter too much and a son-in-law anything. "You know our Angela," he wrote, loving and blunt in the same sentence. If she sees numbers, she stops seeing people. Let her love us, not our balance sheet. The irony was exquisite. She had abandoned me, thinking there was nothing left to take, while the table held proof there was everything to defend. Grief isn't only sorrow, it's the moment a woman realizes the world thinks she is soft clay. I gathered the documents into tidy stacks, labeling them with sticky notes like a librarian of my fate. Street addresses, loan terms, renewal dates, tax IDs. If love is memory plus promise, this paper was both. My hands trembled. Yes, but not from fear. From the reawakening of muscle memory I didn't know I had. The manager I used to be before motherhood made me a one-woman safety net. Robert, dead and still doing what he always did, placing a solid plank beneath my feet. I should tell you something unromantic and true. Older people are targets. We are asked to sign routine forms we can't read without glasses and trust. We are told this signature will make things easier. We hand over keys, pins, and power of attorney because family vowels sound holy. I had done all those things in the soft fog after the funeral. Now I felt each decision like a bruise under a sleeve. Angela's tidy voice, "We needed the money," echoed, and for the first time I heard the plural for what it was, a cover. I made tea because boiling water is the first step of almost any sensible plan. Steam rose, streetlights flicked on. I sat at our kitchen table, the same scarred surface where we taught Angela to write her name, where we paid the mortgage with hope and math, and I wrote a list. Column 1, what exists? Column 2, who thinks it's theirs? Column 3, what is mine by right and what I will reclaim by law? That last word steadied me. Not vengeance, not spectacle, law. Not the shrill theater of confrontation, but the quiet architecture of paperwork done properly. It felt, in its way, like moral hygiene. You might expect rage here, a fantasy of smashing plates, of calling my daughter to lash truth across her pride. Instead, there was a clean, almost professional focus, a sense that my life had been mishandled, and I had been promoted to fix it. I slid the deeds back into protective sleeves, placed Robert's letter in a simple frame, and set an alarm on my phone for 8 a.m. Tomorrow I would call Mr. Peterson, the attorney who hugged my hand at the funeral and said, "If you need a steady head, I'm here." I would ask quiet questions and take quiet notes. Angela and Edward could board their flight to Europe believing my world had collapsed. Let them. Some lessons require altitude, mine required patience. Before bed, I walked room to room, touching things I had dusted for decades. The thrift store lamp that made our first apartment feel like a home. The knife block with 2 blades Robert sharpened so thin they became opinions. The framed photo of 5-year-old Angela, laughing from her father's lap, cheeks apple bright, eyes trust wide. Where had that girl gone? When did she become a broker of her mother's heart? Love answers such questions with memory and boundaries. I was ready to build both. I slept soundly for the first time since the funeral, the documents stacked like guardrails on the nightstand. At dawn, I woke to birds and the ordinary holiness of coffee percolating. I washed the good mug, the one Angela always called old-fashioned because rituals matter most when foundations shift. On the notepad, beneath my columns, I added a 4th line, what my daughter does not yet know. Not to weaponize it, but to remind myself that power isn't loud, it's precise. At 8 sharp, I dialed Mr. Peterson. "Antonia," he said, voice warm as a sweater. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I told him, which was both an answer and a promise. "I found something Robert left me. I believe it's time we talk." Outside, a bus sighed, a dog barked, and somewhere miles away a plane lifted into a pale sky, carrying 2 people who believed they had emptied my life and filled theirs. I looked at Robert's letter, at the company name he had chosen, plain, almost invisible, and felt an ember glow steady behind my ribs. They had no idea what I had, who I was, or what I was willing to learn at 71. "Come by this afternoon," Mr. Peterson said. "Bring everything." "I will," I replied, and hung up, slipping the file into my bag with the care you use when you carry the rest of your life in paper. Mr. Peterson's office sat in an old limestone building that believed in quiet authority, marble floors, frosted glass, brass letters rubbed soft by decades of fingers. He met me in the lobby like a nephew escorting his favorite aunt, offered tea, then guided me to a conference room the size of my first apartment. I laid Robert's envelope and its contents on the table, each document aligned as if straight lines might steady a crooked week. Mr. Peterson read in silence, his brows knitting, unknotting, then lifting in something like respect. When he finally looked up, there was a different weight in his gaze. "Antonia," he said softly, "your husband was prudent, and he was thorough. This structure is elegant. Antonia." He walked me through it like a teacher who never confuses clarity with condescension. The holding company, discreetly named, sensibly domiciled, owned the properties. The properties produced income sheltered by sound tax planning. The accounts were diversified and boring in the way all truly solid things are. He tapped the apartment building where Angela and Edward lived. "This, in particular, is well-positioned," he said. "Rents rising, neighborhood improving, loans locked at old rates. It throws off cash you've never seen because Robert reinvested. That's why the bank statements feel unreal. It's not magic. It's compounding plus discipline." He paused. "He must have loved you very much to carry this quietly for so long." Love, I thought, is a verb with ledgers. Then we turned to the violence done quickly with signatures. The beach house, the truck. He read the transfer papers Angela had pushed through and grimaced. "She had no authority to sell the beach house, Antonia. It wasn't hers to sell." He explained how the title flowed through the company, not our personal names. How Angela's power of attorney covered limited practical acts after the funeral, paying invoices, closing small accounts, not sales of company assets. "This sale can be unwound," he said. "The buyers were likely good-faith purchasers misled by an agent who lacked authority. We'll make them whole and get your property back." I nodded, the calm that carried me from the clinic to this table settling deeper. "No police?" I asked. He watched me, measuring the question beneath the question. "We could involve law enforcement," he said carefully. "Elder financial exploitation statutes exist for a reason, but the law is not only punishment, it's also restoration." I heard myself breathe. "I don't want my daughter in handcuffs," I said. "I want my house back. I want my life back, and I want a plan that teaches her something prison never will." His mouth tugged into a line that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we'll do this quietly, precisely. We'll reverse what can be reversed, wall off what must be protected, and put you officially and unambiguously in control." He made a checklist in tidy black ink. File supplemental corporate resolutions, record affidavits of beneficial ownership, issue notices to property managers, redirect rent flows, freeze discretionary access, notify banks of governance updates. The list grew, not menacing but methodical, the kind of bureaucracy that stands between the vulnerable and the opportunistic. "And the truck?" I asked, feeling Robert's Sunday rag in my palm again, the way he wiped chrome like it could tarnish his patience. Mr. Peterson skimmed the bill of sale. "Harder," he admitted. "Your limited power of attorney might have been stretched to cover this if a clerk didn't read closely. But there's room. If the buyer is decent, and many are, we can reverse with compensation. If not, we'll litigate. Either way, do not worry about capacity or cost. You have both." It is a strange and steadying thing to be told you are not helpless by someone who speaks in filings rather than flattery. When he finished, he folded his hands. "One more thing, Antonia. Secrecy. Do you want your ownership to remain behind the company? There are advantages, privacy, safety." I thought of Angela's bright, practical smile, the way it turned blade-thin when she wanted something. "For now," I said. "I want the world to see what she wanted them to see. A poor widow, managing. I want to move without noise. Later, when the lesson has ripened, we can decide how visible I should be." He didn't ask what lesson. He had already read it between my lines. By evening, the first emails arrived, subject lines that sounded like brooms on a clean floor. Confirmation of recording, acknowledgement of authority, notice of account updates. Mr. Peterson moved like good weather. No drama, measurable change. I made dinner the way I did when Robert worked late, sautéed greens, buttered noodles, a fried egg sliding into place like a sundae. Routine is not denial, it's scaffolding. Between bites, I drafted a new list. People who believe I am weak. People who will learn I am not. I never wrote Angela's name, not because I spared her, but because I had upgraded her category from threat to student. The next morning I began the oddest season of my life: public fragility, private consolidation. I walked to the butcher where the owner always ground chicken for me without charge and said, "How are you holding up, Mrs. Brooks?" I smiled, the soft smile widows are issued. Day by day. I bought 2 apples at the corner shop and endured the cashier's well-meant theater. "You call me if you need anything at all, okay?" And didn't call. Back home, I spent hours on the phone with property managers introducing myself as Antonia, stepping into some of the responsibilities Robert used to handle, and listened to the quiet shift in their tone when they realized the person who cut the checks was on the line. Respect has a sound. It is small and unmistakable. Neighbors noticed what neighbors always do. Aurora from 2 doors down arrived at my fence with a Tupperware of lasagna and questions disguised as comfort. "Is it true?" she asked, lowering her voice though no one was near. "That Angela left for Europe and sold the house? My sister-in-law swears she heard it at the salon. Gossip in our town travels faster than grief." I placed a hand over hers. "She's traveling," I said. "I am reorganizing." It wasn't a lie. It was a paragraph reduced to a sentence you could carry without dropping. At night, alone in the quiet, I permitted myself inventory beyond papers. I sat in each room and asked what it had taught me. The living room. How to entertain people you love when money is thin, make extra pasta, use cloth napkins, light 1 good candle, and turn out the cruel overheads. The bedroom. How to sleep beside someone who snores when you love his breathing more than silence. The kitchen. How to feed others without starving yourself. I wasn't romanticizing, I was reminding. Memory is not indulgence, it is ballast. A week in, Mr. Peterson called with the first victory folded into apology. "I'm sorry we moved so fast that I couldn't deliver this in person, but I thought you'd want to hear immediately. The beach house is yours again." A breath left me, I didn't know I held. "The buyers were kind," he continued. "Frustrated, but kind. They got their money back through the title insurer. Papers recorded this afternoon. I thanked him the way you thank people who restore something you thought only exists in photographs." When I hung up, I pulled the house key from the jar by the door where I keep life's odd metal mystery padlocks, a locker from a YMCA we once joined and quit, and placed it on the counter. A small, shining truth. Some things you love find their way home. Later, I took the bus to the coast because the first return should be humble. The house was exactly as memory insists, and time often refuses. Cream paint a little chalkier, porch boards still holding the rhythm of our feet. I sat on the curb across the street like a girl who'd run away and changed her mind. A man I didn't know stepped out, startled to find me staring, and crossed with the polite caution reserved for dogs and old women. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm remembering," he told me, rueful, how he and his wife had signed papers in a hurry on the strength of a story about a sick mother who needed cash. "We never met her," he said. "Everything was through an agent." I wanted to tell him that the agent was my daughter, and not my daughter at all, the version of her that loved shortcuts more than story. "Instead," I said, "I'm glad you were made whole." He nodded. "We liked the house, but maybe it was always meant to be yours." That sentence followed me all the way home like a benediction I hadn't expected to believe. Back in town, Mr. Peterson advanced the next flank. He redirected rents from the apartment building through the company to me and filed the internal resolutions that named me chair with full signature authority. "One practical suggestion," he added. "Have your property manager reissue tenant notices softly. New contact information, new hours, same stability. Keep it boring." I laughed, a sound I hadn't made in weeks. "Boring," I said, "feels like luxury." At the end of that day, I did an unfashionable thing. I ironed a dress. The wine-colored one, Robert always said, made my eyes look like I remembered my worth. I pressed each seam, each sleeve, and hung it on the closet door as if readiness had a silhouette. Then I stood at the window with a mug of chamomile and watched the street exhale. 2 kids raced scooters. A man dragged his trash bin like a reluctant dog. Somewhere a radio played a song from 1978, daring me to be sentimental. I allowed myself 1 tear for the years we are not given, and then closed the blinds. People think power at 71 is money. It isn't. It's unhurriedness. It's knowing where to place a phone call, what not to post, when to smile and say nothing. It's the refusal to be rushed into noisy righteousness when quiet correction will do. Angela had taken my house and truck and called it necessity. I was taking back my life and calling it policy. One day soon, she would return from Europe to a town that hadn't yet chosen sides, to a mother who seemed as fragile as people expected, to a legal reality that did not. And when she asked me for help, I would give it, but not the kind she wanted. I would give her the kind that changes a person from the inside out. For now, I set the alarm again. Tomorrow, more filings. The day after, a meeting with the manager of the building where my daughter would open her mailbox and find a letter with a bland heading and a firm heart. Not a punishment, a reminder. Actions have owners. Consequences, too. The first time I truly felt the taste of quiet power was the morning I stood before my mirror and didn't recognize the woman in it, not because age had changed her, but because purpose had returned to her posture. My back was straight again. My breath was calm. The lines around my eyes no longer carried sadness but calculation. When Robert died, I thought the best part of me had gone with him. Now I understood. He had simply left me with a blueprint, and I was finally ready to read it. That morning, Mr. Peterson called again. "Mrs. Brooks?" he said, his tone lighter than usual. "The process for transferring control of your daughter's apartment building is almost complete. Once this last set of papers is signed, you'll have full legal authority." "Good," I replied. "Keep my name quiet until I tell you otherwise." "As you wish. One more thing, there's an outstanding issue about the truck. We may be able to recover it, but only if the current owner agrees to a negotiated buyback." "Do it," I said. "Robert would want it home." When I hung up, I realized how strange it felt to give orders again. For decades, I'd managed a household, raised a child, balanced budgets, supported Robert's dreams, but it had been our times life, not my times command. Now, every decision was mine alone. And oddly, I found that I liked it. Outside, autumn was curling the first leaves brown. I walked to the small bakery 2 blocks away, the same one where Angela and I used to get muffins when she was in high school. The owner, Mrs. Chen, smiled softly when she saw me. "How's your daughter?" she asked. "I heard she's abroad, yes?" "Yes," I said. "In Europe, some business thing." Mrs. Chen nodded, then added with a sigh. "Kids these days, always chasing something they can't name." Her words followed me home. Asterisk, something they can't name. Asterisk, that was exactly what Angela had been chasing. Status, comfort, validation, not happiness. Happiness doesn't need to be chased. It's cultivated quietly, like Robert's gardenia plants on the porch. She'd never understood that because I hadn't taught her. I'd given her love but not limits, comfort but not consequence. And now, I was correcting that mistake. 3 weeks passed before Aurora came rushing to my gate, waving her hands like a town crier. "Antonia, have you heard? Edward's in trouble with the bank." I put down my watering can. "Oh? My cousin works there," she whispered. "He says Edward took loans using the apartment as collateral, but the bank found out he's not the real owner. There's going to be an investigation." I smiled faintly. What an unfortunate misunderstanding. Aurora didn't catch the irony. "Your poor Angela. She'll have to come back to fix the mess. Maybe this time she'll realize how good she had it here." Maybe. That night, I poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite wine, the one he'd saved for special occasions. I sat by the window, the same spot where we used to read the newspaper together every Sunday morning. "You planned everything, didn't you?" I whispered into the dark. "You knew I'd need this." The city lights flickered faintly on the horizon, and for a moment, I imagined Robert smiling from somewhere beyond the glass. "Don't worry, my love," I said softly. "I'm handling it." 2 days later, Mr. Peterson called again. "Mrs. Brooks, I thought you'd want to know the legal papers for the apartment building are finalized. Everything is officially under your name now." "And the truck?" "Recovered. The buyer agreed to return it after we explained the situation. You'll have it back in 2 days." "Excellent. Now, Mr. Peterson," I said, lowering my voice, "I want you to prepare an official eviction notice for the tenants of the apartment occupied by my daughter Angela and her husband." He hesitated. Are you sure? Completely. I don't want the property sold or altered, but they must leave. I want the legal process to start quietly. Send the notice through the company, no personal connection. Understood. 30 days notice as per law? Yes, 30 days. No exceptions. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilt. I felt justice. Real justice doesn't shout or destroy, it simply restores balance. Angela had to lose everything she took for granted to understand what it had cost. A week later, Aurora returned, breathless as usual. Antonia, did you hear? Angela's back. Alone. No husband, no fancy car, nothing. She looked terrible, poor thing. I saw her at the market crying on the phone. I thanked her and closed the door gently. Alone, I smiled. The moment had arrived. Mr. Peterson confirmed it that afternoon. She returned last night, he said, and the eviction notice has been delivered. I nodded. Perfect. He paused. You're aware she'll call you soon, right? I'm counting on it. That night, I barely slept. I imagined her face when she opened the letter, the confusion, the panic, the disbelief. I'd been that woman once, the day she called to say she'd sold my house. Now the world had finally turned full circle. At exactly 8 the next morning, the phone rang. Mom, her voice trembled. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. I took a slow breath. Good morning, dear. How was Europe? Mom, I don't have time for that. I got a letter. It says I have to vacate my apartment in 30 days. Some company named Robert Investments Incorporated. Do you know anything about this? Robert Investments. I could almost hear my husband's chuckle from wherever he was. I said, pretending to think. I've never heard of them, sweetheart. Are you sure it's legitimate? I don't know, Mom. Edward left me. He ran off with another woman. Everything's falling apart. Please, can I come see you? Her voice cracked. The same daughter who'd once hung up on me without a second thought was now begging for my comfort. The symmetry was exquisite. Of course, darling, I said gently. Come home. I'll make coffee. An hour later, when I opened the door, I saw a version of Angela I hadn't known in years. Her face was pale, eyes swollen, shoulders collapsed under invisible weight. For a moment, I almost forgot the plan. The mother in me wanted to hold her, but the woman Robert had built in me whispered, wait, asterisk. She sat at the kitchen table, clutching her cup like it was an anchor. Mom, she said, her voice trembling, I'm so sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for leaving you, for selling the house. I was stupid, blind, Edward fooled me. I kept my tone even. It's in the past, honey. No, it's not. I hurt you. I deserve everything that's happening. You don't deserve to suffer, I said softly. But you do need to understand what suffering means. There's a difference. She cried harder then. Truly cried, not the manipulative tears of guilt, but the raw tears of someone whose world has finally fallen apart. When she asked if she could stay for a while, I nodded without hesitation. Of course, sweetheart, this will always be your home. She hugged me for real this time, not out of duty but desperation. Her body trembled against mine, and for the first time in years, I felt her heart beating close to mine again. But this time, I wasn't the fragile mother she pitied. I was the teacher she desperately needed. That night, after she went to bed, I called Mr. Peterson. Begin the next step, I said quietly. What is that, Mrs. Brooks? I want a full investigation of Edward's debts, every signature, every document, every bank. Find out how deep the hole is and how far she's fallen with him. Understood. But may I ask, what's your goal? My goal, I said, staring at the dark ceiling above me, is not to punish my daughter. It's to rebuild her from the ruins she helped create. When I hung up, I felt the calm again. That same strange peace I'd felt in the clinic waiting room when I first learned everything had fallen apart. Only this time, I understood it. It wasn't calm born of defeat. It was the calm of someone who knows exactly what comes next. The morning light came in pale and forgiving, brushing over the kitchen tiles as Angela sat quietly, tracing circles on her coffee mug. She hadn't said much since she'd moved back in. The arrogance that once filled every gesture was gone. In its place was a fragile humility, the kind that comes only after you've met the bottom of your own mistakes. I watched her as she tried to hide the trembling in her hands. She had lost everything: her husband, her home, her sense of control. but somewhere deep down, I knew this was where real transformation could begin. Mr. Peterson called mid-morning. His voice was steady, but I could hear the undercurrent of intrigue. "Mrs. Brooks, I've finished reviewing the financial documents. The situation is complex. Edward's debts exceed $200,000, including bank loans and private creditors. Several accounts contain forged signatures, your daughter's, to be specific." I exhaled slowly. So, she was deceived. Completely, but proving it will take time and discretion. We can use this evidence to absolve her legally. It's a matter of timing and patience. Patience, I repeated softly. That's one thing I've learned to master. After I hung up, I looked at Angela, still lost in her thoughts. "We'll be all right," I said, not as comfort but as fact. She nodded, though she clearly didn't believe me yet. Later that day, I found her in the guest room, her old bedroom, the one with the faded posters from her teenage years. She was sitting on the bed, staring at a manila envelope. "Mom," she said quietly, "I found this in one of Edward's boxes. It has your name on it." My pulse quickened. "My name?" "Yes, it's in Dad's handwriting." For a moment, the air in the room seemed to hold its breath. Another envelope, another message from Robert. I sat beside her, my hands steady though my heart was not. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Inside was a short note and a small silver key. Asterisk, Antonia. If you are reading this after receiving the first envelope, it means our daughter is going through a difficult time. This key opens a safety deposit box at the central bank, box number 247. There is something inside that can help you help her, but use it wisely. With eternal love, Robert. Asterisk. Angela leaned over my shoulder. A safety deposit box? Dad had another one? It seems so. Her eyes flickered with a desperate hope I hadn't seen in months. "Mom, maybe there's something valuable there, something we can sell to fix all this." Asterisk, we. Asterisk, I noticed she said, times we asterisk, not times I asterisk. It was the first sign she was beginning to see us as one again, not two opposing forces. Still, her instinct was the same: solve problems with money. I sighed. "All right," I said after a pause. "We'll go tomorrow." That night, she cooked dinner. The meal was simple pasta, a little overcooked, but it was the first time she'd tried since coming back. We ate in silence, broken only by the occasional clink of forks. "Mom," she said suddenly, "do you ever think about Dad?" "Every day," I replied. She smiled faintly. "I used to think he was too careful, too cautious. But now, I see he was protecting us." "Yes," I said quietly. "He always was." The next morning we went to the bank. Angela was nervous, her fingers twisting in her lap as we waited for the manager to bring the box. When he finally returned, he placed it on the table with a soft thud and left us alone. I turned the key. The lock clicked open, and inside lay rows of velvet pouches. When I lifted the first one, jewels spilled out: diamonds, emeralds, rubies, the colors of a lifetime of patience. Angela gasped, "Mom, this must be worth a fortune." I unfolded the note inside. Robert's handwriting again, strong and deliberate. Asterisk, these jewels belong to my mother and grandmother. Some I bought for you. Their value is not just monetary, it's legacy. If you ever must use them for something that restores what was lost, not what was wasted. Asterisk. Angela's hands trembled as she held a sapphire ring to the light. "We could sell some of these. It might be enough to pay off the debts." "Are you sure that's what you want to do?" I asked, studying her face. She hesitated. "What choice do I have? I can't let the banks take everything. I already lost the apartment. I can't lose what little dignity I have left." Dignity. That word had never sounded so precious. "All right," I said softly. "But remember, your father's words restore what was lost, not what was wasted." For the next few days, Angela met with jewelers, trying to get fair prices. She came home frustrated but determined. "They all want to pay less than it's worth," she complained one evening. "But I managed to sell enough to get $180,000. It's not much, but it'll cover the most urgent debts." I nodded slowly, hiding the truth that I could have written one check to erase it all, but this was her road to redemption, not mine to clear. Meanwhile, Mr. Peterson called with updates. "We've tracked Edward to Paris," he said. He's attempting to secure residency through a fraudulent marriage. Fitting, I murmured. The good news is, this gives us leverage. We can prove that your daughter was deceived and clear her from liability. Do it, I said, quietly. She doesn't need to know yet. At home, Angela worked late into the night sorting papers, making calls, slowly piecing together the wreckage of her life. I watched from the hallway sometimes, unseen. She was learning responsibility the hard way, through sweat, through shame, through effort. And yet beneath that struggle, I saw something beautiful being rebuilt. One evening, as she rubbed her tired eyes, she looked up and whispered, "Mom, do you think Dad would forgive me?" I walked over and touched her shoulder gently. "He already has, Angela. The question is, can you forgive yourself?" Her lips quivered, but she didn't answer. Instead, she gathered the papers into neat stacks, as if order might lead her back to peace. When she finally went to bed, I stayed at the table, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the window. The years had drawn lines of loss and resilience, but tonight they felt softer. Robert had given me one last gift, a chance to save our daughter not through money, but through meaning. And I was determined not to waste it. It's strange how quickly a house can change when forgiveness starts to live inside it. Angela and I had fallen into a new rhythm, quiet, fragile, but honest. She spent her mornings making calls to banks and creditors, her afternoons walking to job interviews, and her evenings sitting across from me at the kitchen table, studying documents under the yellow lamp Robert had bought at a flea market decades ago. Each night, I watched her shoulders straighten a little more. She was no longer the woman who believed the world owed her something. She was learning that every life must be rebuilt by its own hands. One night, as she shuffled through her papers, I received another call from Mr. Peterson. His voice carried satisfaction this time. "Mrs. Brooks, we've completed the fraud investigation. We found enough evidence to prove Edward falsified your daughter's signature and left the country intentionally. Angela can be fully cleared of all responsibility. The law is on your side." I let the words sink in, a quiet victory echoing through the kitchen. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," I said. "Let's move forward, but keep it silent for now. I'll tell her when she's ready." He paused. "You know, Mrs. Brooks, in all my years of practice, I've rarely seen someone handle betrayal with such grace." "It's not grace," I said. "It's purpose." When I hung up, I saw Angela watching me from the table. "Who was that?" she asked. "Just a friend checking in," I lied gently. I had learned to lie not out of malice, but out of mercy. Some truths need to wait until hearts are steady enough to hold them. That week, she started a night job cleaning offices. It wasn't glamorous, but it was work, and it gave her something priceless: self-respect. She'd return home exhausted, her hands smelling faintly of disinfectant and soap, yet her eyes held a light I hadn't seen in years. "Mom," she said one night, collapsing into a chair, "I met a woman today named Mrs. Johnson. She's been cleaning offices for 20 years. She told me, 'Child, some people work here because they had no choice. Others work here because they lost sight of their choices. Which one are you?'" "And what did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I'm the second kind, but I don't plan to stay that way forever." I smiled. "Then you're already on your way back." Her transformation was subtle but undeniable. She began budgeting carefully, cooking her own meals, and even helping our elderly neighbors with groceries. The arrogance was gone, replaced by empathy. The more she gave, the more she seemed to heal. Meanwhile, Mr. Peterson continued handling the legal maze. I sent him documents, approved signatures, and occasionally met him downtown, always under the guise of simple errands. Each time, he'd update me quietly. "Everything is progressing. Angela's debts are nearly resolved. Edward's case in France is moving forward. Once it's complete, your daughter will be free." The phrase "your daughter will be free" echoed in me long after the calls ended. I wondered what freedom meant now. For Angela, it was release from guilt and shame. For me, it was release from fear, the fear of having failed her as a mother. Weeks passed. The world outside our home moved as it always did: gossiping neighbors, slow buses, the same bakery with the same polite questions. But inside, the air was shifting. Our conversations grew warmer. We laughed again. One night, as we washed dishes side by side, Angela said softly, Mom, I know it sounds strange, but losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. How so? I asked. Because it made me realize what I'd taken for granted. You, this house, Dad's memory. I thought I was chasing success, but really, I was running away from gratitude. I said nothing. There are moments a mother shouldn't interrupt, even to agree. A few days later, Mr. Peterson called again. "Mrs. Brooks, it's time," he said. "All legal proceedings are finalized. Your daughter is free from every debt Edward created. Would you like to tell her, or shall I?" "I will," I said. "She needs to hear it from me." That night, I invited Angela to join me for tea in the living room. She looked puzzled. "What's this about?" I handed her a folder. Inside were the court documents, sealed and official. "These," I said, "mean your name is clear. The banks can't touch you. Edward's crimes have been proven. You owe nothing." Her eyes widened. "What? How? I don't understand. How did you—" I took a deep breath. The time for silence was over. "Angela, there's something you need to know. When your father passed away, he left more than I told you. He had investments, properties, and savings. He wanted me to keep it a secret until the time was right. You thought you took everything from me when you sold the beach house and the truck, but in truth, those were just the smallest pieces of what he built." Angela stared, speechless, as I handed her the second envelope, the one with the property deeds, the bank accounts, the company documents. "Mom, you're rich?" I smiled faintly. "I was rich in patience before I was rich in money." She covered her face with her hands. "You knew this whole time, when I came here crying, when I had nothing?" "Yes. And you let me suffer?" "I let you times learn, Angela. You can't teach compassion to someone who's never felt loss. You can't teach gratitude to someone who's never known need. I didn't do this to punish you, I did it to prepare you." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't deserved," I said softly. "It's given the way your father gave us everything quietly, without ever asking for thanks." Angela wept then, not the bitter tears of regret, but the deep, cleansing kind that come when guilt finally cracks open into understanding. When she could speak again, she whispered, "What can I ever do to make this right?" "Live better," I said simply. "Work with purpose. Use what we have to help, not to hide. That's what your father would have wanted." She reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "I will, Mom. I swear I will." That night, after she went to bed, I stepped outside onto the porch. The stars were sharp against the velvet sky, and I imagined Robert up there, still watching over us, his plan complete. "Your lesson worked," I whispered. She finally found her way home, and for the first time in years, I felt not vengeance, not victory, but peace. The following days felt like the gentle aftermath of a long storm, quiet, luminous, and strangely clean. Angela had changed in ways that no money could ever orchestrate. She rose early now, made breakfast for both of us, and went to her night job without complaint. She no longer spoke about luxury or plans for wealth. Instead, she spoke about rebuilding, about redemption. The arrogance that once shaped her voice had turned into calm humility. I could finally see in her something I had almost given up, hoping for her father's steadiness. One evening, while we were preparing dinner, she said, "Mom, I know I can quit my job now that everything's solved, but I don't want to. Not yet." "Why not, sweetheart?" I asked, slicing tomatoes for the salad. "Because I need to finish this chapter properly. If I leave too soon, it'll feel like I didn't learn anything. I want to earn my peace, not inherit it." Her words made me pause. Robert would have smiled. "Then finish it," I said. "You've earned the right to choose your path." That night, Aurora came by, carrying her usual curiosity wrapped in concern. "Antonia, everyone's talking," she said in a hushed tone as soon as she sat down. "They say you got your house back, that Angela's debts disappeared overnight, and that maybe," she leaned closer, "maybe you were never as poor as we all thought." I smiled gently and poured her tea. "People do love a good story." "Is it true?" she pressed. "Yes," I said simply, "but truth doesn't always need to be explained." Aurora blinked, then nodded slowly. "I see now why you stayed silent. You were teaching her, weren't you?" "I wasn't teaching," I corrected softly. I was waiting for her to be ready to learn. Over the next months, Angela's transformation deepened. She no longer carried herself like a victim of betrayal. Instead, she stood like someone who had been tempered, burned, reshaped, and reborn. She began volunteering with the women she met through her cleaning job, helping them write resumes, fill out forms, and find community resources. One day she told me, "Mom, I want to study again. Social work. I want to help women who've gone through what I did." I nodded. Robert would be proud. Her eyes softened. "So, would you?" "I already am," I said. By the time Mr. Peterson called again, the tone of his voice had changed from formal professionalism to something warmer, almost familial. "Mrs. Brooks, I wanted to congratulate you. Everything is finalized. Edward's fraud case has concluded your daughter is officially cleared. He's being deported." "Then that chapter is closed," I said. "Yes. And, if you'll forgive my honesty, I think you've managed something rare. You turned justice into grace." When I told Angela about Edward, she didn't react with anger or satisfaction. She simply said, "I hope he learns what I did, that money can't buy peace." Then she looked up at me. "Mom, I want to move forward. No more revenge, no more regrets, just purpose." 6 months passed, and our life took on a beautiful simplicity. We spent weekends tending the garden, repainting the fence, and cooking recipes Robert used to love. Angela's laughter, once sharp with superiority, had become soft, genuine. Sometimes, when she looked at me, I could see the little girl who used to hold my hand at the beach. One morning she came into the kitchen holding an envelope with trembling fingers. "Mom, I did it," she said. "I've been accepted into the university's master's program in social work. They even offered me a partial scholarship." I hugged her tightly. "You deserve this, Angela." "I want to pay for the rest myself," she said. "I've been saving from my job." I started to protest, but she stopped me with a smile. "I need to do this on my own, Mom. You and Dad already gave me everything." That afternoon, Aurora came to visit again, as she often did on Fridays. She watched Angela through the window, sitting at the table surrounded by textbooks and notes. "Antonia," she said softly, "I have to admit something. When you first told me what you were doing, I thought you were cruel. But now, I think you were the wisest mother I've ever known." I chuckled. "Wisdom is just pain that finally learned its purpose." "She's different now," Aurora said. "It's like she's been reborn." "She has," I replied, "and so have I." That evening, Angela came home from work with a small envelope in her hand. "Mom, I got a letter from Edward," she said, setting it on the table. My stomach tightened. "What does he want?" "He's in prison in France. He says he regrets everything, that he wants forgiveness." "And what do you feel?" I asked. Angela looked out the window, where the last light of day touched the garden Robert had planted years ago. "Honestly, nothing. Not hate, not pity. Just distance. I've already forgiven him, but not for him, for me." I reached out and took her hand. "That's the final step, you know, when the past no longer defines your peace." She smiled faintly. "You were right about everything, Mom. You didn't save me with money. You saved me by letting me lose it." That night, as she studied in her room, I stepped onto the porch. The stars shimmered like old promises kept. I whispered to the sky, "We did it, Robert. She's whole again." For the first time since he died, I felt his answer not in words but in warmth, in the quiet certainty that love, when patient, becomes its own kind of justice. Months later, Angela and I drove to the beach house together, the one she had once sold and that I had quietly reclaimed. The ocean was calm, the air full of salt and memory. She stood on the porch, tears in her eyes. "It looks the same," she said. "Because some things shouldn't change," I answered. We spent the day cleaning, cooking, and laughing. As the sun dipped into the water, she turned to me and said, "Mom, I have an idea. Let's turn this house into something meaningful, a place where women like me can stay until they rebuild their lives." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "A shelter?" "Yes, for second chances." Robert's dream had always been to build, not own. I smiled at her. He'd love that idea. "I think he already does," she whispered. As the tide rolled in, the house seemed to breathe again, not just a home, but a beginning. Angela had found redemption, and I had found peace. The circle was complete. The world hadn't just given me justice, it had given me something far greater: understanding. And in the end, That's the kind of inheritance no one can sell, steal, or destroy.